All right, good afternoon. I'm Gwen Wolford. I'm Director of Government Affairs for the College of Food, Ag, and Environmental Sciences, including OSU Extension.
And I'm Larry Long. I'm the former executive director of the County Commissioners Association for almost 40 years. Now I'm retired and doing a little work with Extension.
And Larry's also taught some classes over at the Glenn College, so he's been staying real active. And we're going to just talk a bit today to set the stage for the June 19th training on working with public officials. So, let's see here. So there's one of the big challenges for all of you as county extension directors is making the time to do this. It takes an investment of time and energy to build relationships with public officials while completing all the other things you're expected to do as a county director, and for many of you as a county educator as well. So I just wanted to say up front, that we do recognize and appreciate that. I think the best way to think about it is to think that all this relationship building and these activities need to be done as a part of what you do rather than thought of as separate things to do. Then it'll become second nature and you'll be able to just accomplish that without a lot of extra thought.
Yeah, I might add, Gwen. I think one of the things that often happens is commissioners and either all elected officials are often used to people coming in when they need something.
Yes.
And to the greatest degree, you need to try to develop long-standing relationships, build that relationship over a period of time, so that when you really need something, it's not a unique thing. I know even in the state legislature, we have to do that day in and day out when we're working with the state legislature. You just can't go in at budget time. You have to. It's a continual process of developing that relationship.
Right. You can't just go in with your hand out.
Right.
That won't work so well. All right. Working outside of the usual university and OSU extension system is definitely one of the challenges. And we'll talk more about that on the 19th. We'll talk a little bit about that today. But as our urban counties continue to move more into in-depth program evaluation models to make funding decisions, it becomes more important to stop talking to ourselves and get out of your comfort zone.
And that's something I think we all do. I know when I was still working full time, my life revolved around the legislature and county officials. And sometimes you lose perspective, and it's often sometimes difficult to move out of that. But I oftentimes learn more in my coffee shop with private business interests. I got to the point that I started talking to private business interests, and you start learning an awful lot from constituencies that you normally don't communicate with.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, this is definitely a switch for us in extension. I sometimes tell people that it's like I left extension, but I really didn't because I work, almost completely with external people at this point in time, but I'm still a part of the college and extension. So kind of have a unique perspective and, it can be challenging. And I know that some people say that they hate politics and they don't like this part of their job. And politics is everywhere, whether it's public office politics or internal office politics or family politics. I'll just tell you one story. County director who has since retired one day at an event said to me, "Gwen, what did you do that they made you do this job?" So that sort of reflects how I know some people feel about this, but working for a public entity, it is part of the reality that we have to deal
It
with.
certainly is, day in and day out.
All right, so our comfort zones here, the blue is probably for most of us within the organization, and don't know that we really want to get into the yellow, but to get into that green growth zone as we relate to others that we're not used to relating to is really the idea.
Yeah, I think, and I've sort of noticed that on a personal level since I've retired and had the opportunity to work up here a little bit in terms of moving out and learning new things. I was real reluctant to, other than just governmental affairs stuff, and I've had an opportunity. So it's not easy always to move out there, but you really grow and you learn when you move into those other areas, and you can relate to how they work, things work on your daily events.
Right.
The We're going to talk a little bit about comfort zones, and we really see an awful lot of this in the business world. If we walked up the street to the Fisher School, you'd hear an awful lot about this. And in the business world, what it's referred to is relationship marketing. And it not only applies in the corporate world, but it also applies to individuals, it applies to government, to education, and to nonprofit. And breaking that shell is sometimes relatively difficult to do. It's a concept that you'll find in a lot of extension literature. And we'll provide for you on the 19th a list of some other sources of information from various universities, in addition to Ohio State, across the country, where they've developed more, in a lot more detail, this concept of relationship marketing. And I think we want to go there. Let's go to this one. You know, it's Ralph Waldo Emerson was quoted as saying that future times can be very good if we know how to make them so through key relationships. And as you'll see, the source there is from an early, almost 1990 Journal of Extension article back then. Is sort of where we found this stuff, and we think it's still relevant today. Relationship marketing is sort of the new concept. And basically what we had is, before that, we were really dealing with what was referred to as transactional marketing, where you go out and you make the sale. It's what I always say, it's the old Music Man, the Professor Harold Hill, going out and making that sale and leaving. And more we see that in the sales world, in the marketing world, and that's what we're all really doing. Even in this area, we're marketing in terms of that, is developing long-standing relationships. And
Absolutely.
so that's where the basic thrust of relationship marketing.
And I guess I would say, to simplify and probably oversimplify, for those of us in extension, it doesn't matter how much we know and how much technical expertise we have until the people know and trust you, because you've got to have both to be successful.
When you build key, there's two pieces here. Extension, I think, is real good at looking at broad audiences of support. And yet, in many ways, it's developing key relationships with target audiences that may be more important than a broad public awareness and the support of the programming that you're involved with, and particularly in the urban counties. What you're really looking for are individuals, key individuals, and we'll be talking more about that on the 19th, who some of those are, and we're hoping that you're going to be there so we can involve you in those discussions. Involving them, what you're really doing is building ambassadors that can spread the word, understand your program, and leaders in the community that will be supportive and pass these things on to a broader public.
Absolutely.
The other part of this is knowing people, knowing the individuals. We're going to be dealing on the 19th with a number of various groups. And I guess the first question is, as it relates to a lot of the elected officials, and we'll be talking about state legislators, we'll be talking about county officials, we'll be talking about some city officials, is the question we want you to ask yourselves is, do you know them? And you'll receive a questionnaire that deals with some of that, but maybe even more important, do they know you? If they don't, they should. And we'll be talking about some strategies where, number one, you can get to know them, and maybe even more importantly, they'll know who you are and what you do. If you're not known, you probably need to reach out and try to expand that horizon of those programs. The other sort of interesting thing is the rules that I've always used in dealing in the legislature, and I think it's equally applicable in local officials and government officials, and probably every endeavor, is that was what I call the 4 B's when you're dealing with elected officials or other groups. First and foremost is to be factual. I'm going to go to the other one that's sort of the relate, but to be honest, clearly. When you're dealing with elected officials in particular, you really got to be flexible, because their demands are such that you just need to be very flexible with them. And sometimes in meetings, and you're going to find that particularly in the larger counties, where you may have to meet with staff. And that's another thing we'll be talking about on the 19th, is sort of key staff positions and assistants and other county staff that may be just as effective as dealing with the elected official, and may give you entree to them. I think the other thing that's very important in all this is you need to be relentless. And that doesn't mean you're going to be insulting or too aggressive, but you have to have passion for what you're doing. And I think elected officials see that and feel that. The other part of it is you got to be yourself in many ways, or you're probably not going to be successful, because people will sense that right away if you're chewing off more than you really know. So one of the hints here is to find one thing or another person of these elected officials, something you have in common with the elected official,
Right.
the staff person, or the department head. So find and it might be sports, it might be church, or
Right.
other things. It might be a particular area. In terms of environment, it may have to do with some of the dilapidated housing problems and foreclosure issues that exist in your community. But there's something, and it may not even be business related. It may be social related. And so you got three categories of individuals that you probably need to deal with: those elected officials themselves,
Hmm.
staff members, and then even maybe more important, the general staff is a department head. And we'll be talking about, particularly in the county setting, the various departments.
Right.
And one of the suggestions we're going to be making to you is find one department head that you become friends and allies with, because they're going to communicate up and get a lot of credibility that way.
Absolutely. I think we can't say enough about that, and we'll talk about how volunteers fit into this process when we meet on the 19th as well, because that's certainly a key piece of what we do in extension. But a lot of the things will apply there too. All right. Now, Larry mentioned this a little bit, but one thing that everybody needs to understand is that the world in which the elected or public officials operate is very different than the world that we operate. Um, if we put something on our calendars in extension a year from now, we wouldn't even think we needed to call and confirm and make sure that it was still on the calendar, because it would be. With public officials, it's so different because the environment in which they're working is changing all the time. An issue that is on the back burner today might be a hot issue that's got to get taken care of tomorrow. And typically, they do not schedule real far out. If they do, it's always subject to change. When we're going downtown, I know that we always call either the day before or the morning of to make sure that that appointment is still going to work.
Yeah.
So that we don't make a trip down there, and especially when we're taking Dean McPherson with us, don't want to take his time to take him down and then have the meeting not happen.
And that can get very frustrating, because as Gwen will tell you, so much in the legislature, and I think you'll find this in counties also.
Yep.
You get meetings scheduled, you show up. Sometimes they've been called someplace else. It just is unavoidable. And there's going back to the thing. You really need to be flexible with that and follow up. They'll get you in
Right.
eventually, but you need to be flexible on those types of issues.
And we all need to remember that it's more important to us to get to see them than it is for them to get to see us.
Yes.
We've got to realize that we're not their only priority, and that can be very frustrating. In Washington is kind of the extreme. Sometimes you might meet with a junior level staff person standing by the flagpole outside the door because there's no place else to meet. And,
Right.
Those kind of things are just the reality of the world they live in. In committee meetings, I think at all levels of government, people will get up and leave to take care of something else and come back. And we wouldn't look on that favorably in things that we do, but in that world, it's just the way things are. There might be 3 committees that senator is on meeting at the same time, and so they're trying to divide their time and try to, get something out of all of them.
Yeah, we'll be talking a little more on the 19th about that. It leads us into the whole idea that you got to be relatively concise.
Yes.
You got to be prepared. You got to be concise. You need to get to the point, and you need to be careful when you do written materials not to leave too much.
Right. Don't want to leave them a notebook, even if it's got a table of contents. We try to do just 1 page front and back. When we do our legislative materials, that's what we do. We used to do a 30-page annual report. Now we do the quad fold that has 6 panels, I believe, on it. And then periodically we send these 1-page front and back pieces so that we keep our name and what we're doing in front of them.
Yeah, well, and it's similar with the Commissioners Association. Gwen, as you know, the legislative program of the Commissioners Association is probably about a 40-page document
At
with
least.
well over 100 issues in it. But what we always did is we got the 5 or 6 that's prioritizing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I think we all have to do. There's an awful lot on the plate, but you also got to be able to show what are the priorities and
Right.
what are the needs. And like she said, no more than front and back a page on some of them. Now you can leave more because the staff will probably dig into it. In some counties, the staff will dig into
Right.
it. But for the elected official, be sure you got it summarized. And that forces you also to determine what's really important, and in terms of just sort of making it into those 2 pages.
Right. All right. Well, we're looking forward to June the 19th and getting together with all of you. And oh, this is not going to be a lecture, it's going to be a conversation because all of you have experiences to contribute in terms of what's worked for you and what hasn't in this area. Um, on your handout that you're going to be getting, there are a list of public offices, and your assignment before you come basically is to try to identify as many of those public office holders as you can. You may want to keep track for yourself of which ones you know without looking and which ones you need to look up. And there are resources on that handout that you'll be getting that give you links to find, where those people are, basically. And so there are also some other questions for you to reflect on before you come, and that's where we'll start that conversation on the 19th, and we'll get more into some of the other things, the nuts and bolts of how government works and is funded at all levels, how public officials work a little bit more in depth, how you fit within OSU Extension and within Ohio State, communications and relationship building strategies, and more. And so if there are questions you have after viewing this that you want to make sure we address, feel free to send them to me. My email address is on the screen, and we will make sure that we work those into the presentation and the conversation on the 19th.
Look forward to seeing everybody on the 19th. It should be fun.
It should be.
We're going to have fun, and we hope that you do too.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everybody, for your time and
Thank you.
attention.